Social 60 panel, where we invite industry professionals to share their knowledge about social media best practices in a particular industry. My name is Christina, and I'm inbound marketing specialist here at Hootsuite, and I will be the moderator for today's panel. I'm very excited to be hosting today's panel because we are going to be talking about social media for nonprofits. Today, I'm here with three of our amazing panelists, Connor Galloway, who is the director of Junction YBR, where he works on digital marketing strategies, high-level marketing plan development, incorporating SEO, online advertising, content marketing, social media, and a lot more. He's coming from the agency side, so he's going to be sharing with us how he uses social media with his clients. We also have here Nick from Children's Hospital in Los Angeles, so he's all the way there in sunny Los Angeles, where he does social media and online content marketing for them. Nick will be coming from the client side of things, so he's going to be able to share with us how he uses social media for Children's Hospital in LA. And finally, we have Mark Horvath here, who is the founder of Invisible People, where he leverages the power of video and massive reach of social media to share the compelling, gritty, and unfiltered stories of homeless people from Los Angeles to Washington, D.C. So it's going to be interesting to see how these three use social media to work with their nonprofits. So now that you know who our panelists are, I'm going to get started with the questions that we have provided. But before we do that, actually, we also are going to be hosting a Twitter chat alongside this Google Hangout. So make sure you are using the hashtag Social60. You can see it with my name there. We're going to be following along. If you have any questions, tweet it using that hashtag. And if you have any additional questions, make sure you also include it in our Google Plus Hangout event page there. We'll be reviewing those at the very end after we've gone through our set of questions with the panelists, and we'll be able to get the panelists to answer it for you guys on air. All right, so let's get started here. Panelists, are you guys ready to converse, to maybe disagree on something? Let's talk about social media for nonprofits here. So question number one, how has social media benefited your organization or causes that you've been involved with? Let's get Mark to get started here.
Well, I originally, when I started Invisible People, I didn't set out using Twitter and Facebook to be a social media guru, whatever that was. It was free. It was really, at the time, I had no money, and it was the only tool available. Now, it's social media not only saves my life, it helps me help other people.
That's awesome.
And that's truly amazing.
Nick, do you have any input on how you use social media for your organization?
Yeah, for us it's been a pretty fun and exciting opportunity to experiment on a lot of things, but more importantly, I think it certainly sped up the process for acquisition. So typically in our world, there's a lot of fundraising or awareness components that we're responsible for. So social media has definitely provided an opportunity for ourselves and other brands to get in front of audiences in more meaningful ways.
Perfect. And Connor, how about you? How have you used social media for your clients?
Yeah, it's sort of an interesting question for me because coming from the agency side, it's a bit different. But for me, what I've found is that we get the chance to work with a lot of really interesting nonprofits, and they come to us and they have the same kind of goals that profit-based businesses have. It's like raise funds, raise awareness, raise engagement, and they've been doing those things using more traditional methods. And I think almost in every instance, we found though all of those same things can be accomplished in a more efficient, more scalable way using social media.
Perfect. Now, going into our next question here, this one I want to really know about this one because I work on the corporate side of things. Tell us, what is the main differences between nonprofits and corporations in regards to social media strategies? Connor, since you last finished off, let's get you started here, seeing how you are on the client side and you probably work with a lot of different nonprofits and as well as corporations.
Totally. I mean, first off, I mean, social media for nonprofits is kind of like getting a bit of a leg up. Like you get a bit of a cheat code almost, if you will, for social media for nonprofits, because when you're thinking about the strategy and how to get people on board and telling the story, there are already, no matter what the nonprofit is, there are already this core group of people who are really fired up about whatever it is the cause is. And so whenever we're starting off, we just think like, how do we activate those people and get those people to turn around and tell the story for us? Like, how do we make them look really cool, rather than, we're not trying to sell a product or jam something down people's throats. All we're trying to do is just get a story out. And so the difference between social media for nonprofits and corporate really is that story element, because we don't have to worry about what are we selling and are people going to find us authentic.
Exactly. How about you, Mark?
I have a different take. I actually think there is no difference. If you don't sell, you don't eat. If you don't get donations, you don't eat. On the other side, I think nonprofits really, especially on the customer service angle, really need to look at brands and how brands are listening. I mean, you get on Southwest Airlines, or you get, someplace and at a restaurant even, and you tweet out, hey, I like this or I didn't like this, you get an engagement. Where nonprofits aren't doing that. They're really not very well engaging their customers. It all boils down really to the same thing: is you have to engage people, you have to provide worth, and hopefully establish some kind of community. I think nonprofits, again, in this particular context of this question, really need to look at for-profit strategies more and develop into their own.
That's great. How about you, Nick? How have you used, what's the difference between nonprofit and corporate social media use and strategies?
Well, similar to Mark, I think people are just starting to realize that there are no differences, in my opinion. Social media should have business objectives. That's the way you determine success. Specifically on the nonprofit side, you definitely should be strategic in the way you roll out content. If you're asking someone for something like a donation, for instance, but really got to think about the way that a relationship evolves before someone's actually willing to open up their wallet for you. So I don't think there is a difference between nonprofit and for-profit social media strategies.
A great example I'd like to just bring out right now is, like, if you look at, content marketing is the big thing now. It's not just social media. It has to be everything all together. And if you look at Oreo isn't saying, hey, eat our cookies, eat our cookies. They're doing this funny stuff, trying to engage people, making it light, having fun. And about every other day, they say, oh, here's our cookies. Where nonprofits are always going, look at us. And they forget that, you need to talk about other stuff, which is an important strategy. For-profits get that nonprofits have a hard time talking about anything but themselves.
That's true. And nowadays you also see a lot of for-profit organization brands telling their story more, and including their nonprofit, not their nonprofit side, their charitable sides. Like, for example, like WestJet stories. I love their stories, and I think that's those. Now I see like brands are sharing more stories like that too. Now, what kinds of content do you guys share on social media, and why? Mark, let's get you started here.
Well, for me, I empower homeless people to tell their own stories, which is the primary. My own personal feed, I mix it up with, what I'm having for lunch, and some marketing stuff. I think that's important because the general public has kind of detached from the large nonprofits, and you have to have some kind of a personality. I know Twitter gets a lot of heat for, people talking about their bologna sandwiches, but I'm just using that as an example, is you have to put in some personality into your social feeds. Invisible People is primarily homeless people telling their own stories, but it's presented in such a way that there's hope. I really believe, especially in the cause side, that we have to be real about our storytelling. We have to be real about the social crises that we're trying to help, but we have to present it in such a way that there's hope. Nonprofits historically have presented messages that were almost in an entertainment fashion, or we've solved the process, which is important. But in today's world, and a great example is America's Home Makeover. You've all watched that.
Yeah.
At the last 5 minutes of the show is the good stuff. Is they move the bus and everybody goes yay and cries and all that. But there's 55 minutes of drama. And my point is, and I'm going to use it in the lens of homeless services, is people go out and they relapse. They go back drinking. They go back use drugs, or whatever the particular cause is, might stumble a little bit. It's okay to show that. It's okay to show the process. So one of the reasons we've had success is that it's authentic, it's real, and we show the process. We're not just saying, oh, look at our trophies, here's all this good stuff. We're showing how it got there.
Perfect. Connor, what kind of content do you use on social media for the nonprofits you work with?
Yeah, so I just think it really comes down to giving whatever that backstory is. One of the great things about social media is that it kind of gives us a behind-the-scenes view of whatever's going on. And so there are people who care about the cause, whatever it is. And so when we look at what we're going to be creating, it's like, how do we get people in, and like how do we make them feel like they're a part of it? An example would be, we were working with the Heart and Stroke Foundation a while ago, and to get 19 to 25-year-olds to quit smoking, rather than showing them pictures of black lungs and cancer and death, we showed them what they could do with the money that they would save with smoking, rather than wasting it on cigarettes. And so that's great. Like, it was a really cool contest that people got to get involved with. You had to win prizes. We had Carly Rae Jepsen and the Canucks on board and all of those great things. But where people really got fired up was when they got to like follow along with us in like going down the street and shopping with Carly Rae, for example, or setting up the behind the scenes, all of those like little things that we might not think are particularly important. Those are the things that people make people feel like they're a part of it. And make them really buy in and be like, okay, this is a nonprofit, or this is a cause that I'm personally invested in because they brought me into the process. So that's a place where we start looking at the content, and then everything else kind of stems from there.
Perfect. And Nick, what kind of content do you share on social media?
Now, I'm really fortunate to work for a great organization. I mean, Children's Hospital Los Angeles tends to be the hospital that other hospitals refer their patients to when things get too difficult or too complicated. So there's no shortage of amazing stories here. And that was really one of the most attractive things for me in coming here. We sampled a lot of different topics. I mean, everything from research to dog therapy, celebrity integrations. I mean, we tried a lot of different things when I first started. And, we were pretty quick to realize that, there were 3 key components to what we do here and what our audience resonated with. We allowed the audience to really dictate the type of content we share. And those 3 components are, celebrate. So that's where we celebrate our successes. There's a bucket for educate, which that's the content that adds value to the community in regards to healthcare and medical research. And then inspire, content that everyone can feel good about.
Yeah.
And what we were very surprised to find out, and it was no strategic thinking on our end, it just sort of organically happened, is that when we created those buckets, they seemed really broad, but they were so effective when we were actually producing content for our paid strategies. We found that those organic buckets really turned into a paid strategy checklist for us. So anytime we were creating content for our paid placements, we made sure that that piece of content had those 3 items in them.
Perfect. And with that, the content that you are sharing, going into the 4th question here that I have is, how do you guys engage your audience in social media, and why? So Nick, why don't you get us started with this question here?
Yeah, this was really simple for us. I mean, we engage with people the way that they would be expected to be engaged in real life. So we spend a lot of time in community management. We try and acknowledge almost every comment that comes through our social channels, even if it's just simply saying thank you. We try and acknowledge the audience as they would in any community setting. Nobody likes to be ignored, and if we're really giving, we should be getting the same in return, and it's happening organically. People are starting to post their, we'll post a sort of, say for instance on Facebook, we'll post something about, let's say Doctor's Day, and we just have a whole slew of former patients and employees and volunteers who just start commenting without being provoked, about their experiences here, and I mean, to me, mission accomplished when that happens.
Definitely. And Mark, how do you engage with your audience on social media?
Well, there's a couple of different ways, and it depends on the objective. So if I'm trying to make, like I do some work with Ford and Haynes, and I'm trying to do some brand cause stuff, I'll do a little research and see who's out there and, go and make friends. One of the biggest tips is, especially working with brands, or just anybody, I mean, it's just social norms. You just don't go up and say, hey, give us stuff. You say, hey, how's your morning? Hey, sorry you had a flat tire. Engage as a human. And also that's very important for when you're doing influencer outreach. I'm very, very, very lucky that a wonderful bunch of people out there have continued to share, which is homelessness, which is a very touchy subject. And really, marketing is everything. It's everything. It's not just advertising, it's everything. So it's very important that you, to me anyways, that if it's that person has 10 followers or 10,000 followers, that you treat them all the same. One tip that I can give you that people don't really do a lot is look at your followers. So I try to look at my followers every single day because often, like Richard Branson, he didn't say, hi, I'm following you. Alyssa Milano didn't say, hi, I'm following you. All the homeless people that follow me usually don't say, hi, I'm following you. But these are people that you want to know that are following you, and you want to engage them. And then you say, hey, how you doing? Sorry you had a flat tire. Engage in a human aspect. Primarily, I think Nick said it right on, is that you really have to know your audience and who you want to reach. And once you provide that content and then you interact with them is probably the best strategy.
Perfect. And Connor, how do you engage your audience on social media?
Yeah, so it's an interesting question because it's like, how do we engage? Like, how do we reply, or how do we get them to create content? And I think there's a bit of a misconception in general in like social media for profits or nonprofits, and it's that like, let's get people to create user-generated content. Let's get people to tweet at us, post at us, like do all of this stuff, but there's no follow-through. Right, like we're asking for this stuff, and we're just expecting people to be posting about us and sharing about us, and we're not doing anything about it. I think that our biggest opportunity as organizations is to be taking this great stuff that people are creating, even if it's just commentary, feedback, photos that they're posting, and do something with it. Like do something really cool, right? Like we can put together videos, collages, even just like the power of getting reshared by an organization on Instagram is lost on us sometimes because we're in this stuff every day. Yeah. For an individual who loves a cause or a nonprofit to get their content featured anywhere and reshared and said, here's an example of something great, is a big deal for that person. And more than that, what it does is it encourages that behavior. So we're putting that back out into the world and telling the world, look at how awesome this is. And then everyone else will be following along going, oh, okay, I see what's getting rewarded. Like I see what's a positive here, and then that starts the snowball rolling. And then what we can do is continue to create cool content. And as that grows, we have more opportunity and more opportunity. And then we get to a place where it's just self-perpetuating, where that user-generated content is happening on its own.
I'd like to add the power of reciprocity. It plays a big part. I mean, social media is just a giant cocktail party, and what happens in real life, the same social norms happen online. And if I ask you out for lunch and treat, and you're going to feel like obligated. It's the same with retweeting and everything else, and you can be very intentional about networking with somebody and doing the law of reciprocity. This happens great with nonprofits in your own sector because it's rare that we talk about each other. And if you start sharing, I mean, come on, poverty, homelessness, whatever the cause is, it's bigger than any one organization. And if you start sharing their content, they're going to start sharing your content, and it really opens up a lot of avenues.
Perfect. Now, I just want to put a plug in here to our viewers. If any of you guys have any questions, you guys can tweet your questions using the hashtag social60. We'll get the panelists to answer your questions at the very end, but if we still have time. And also, if you don't have Twitter, hopefully you have Twitter by now, you can put your question in the Google Plus event page as well. All right, so moving on here, we have another question. What do you guys measure to determine your success on social media and why? So Mark, why don't you get us started with this question here?
Good. So I'm going to go against the grain because everybody, and Beth Cantor is going to kill me for this because she writes books on all this data and nonprofit stuff, and I love you, Beth. But I think, so we put all this energy into looking at analytics, but it's the end result. So for me, the success is somebody's perception was changed about homelessness. And the end result is a nonprofit gets funding, a homeless person gets into housing. Very similar. It's not that we spiked in this type of analytics. I think we have to look at that end result. For-profits is, did they buy that stereo? Did they buy that car? We look at the front end of the analytics, and often we don't connect the back end, which is my biggest point. So to me, I really believe we know if you're doing good or if you're doing bad. I'm also a CMO of a Syracuse rescue mission, and we have a great team of digital people, and we have 14 thrift stores throughout New York State. And we could spend days looking at analytics, but what's important are the sales results. Are people actually donating clothes? Are people buying clothes? So that the end of whatever your strategy is what you have to look at far more than how many retweets you had.
Very good. Connor, how about you? What do you measure to determine your success on social media and why?
Yeah, obviously coming from an agency, being able to measure and report success is everything, right? So yeah, I think that there's a delta, right? So we've adopted this idea of measuring social media. We've sort of gotten there, whereas 3 to 5 years ago we were just saying social media because it's necessary. Now we're getting on board. We're measuring things. We're incorporating Google Analytics, which is awesome. But yeah, it's that why are we doing this in the first place? Are we trying to raise money, get people to an event, raise awareness? And so the measurement hasn't changed, right? Like whether it was a billboard or throwing a charity event or doing a golf tournament, if we're trying to affect something, that's what we're measuring. The bridge that we need to create is between that like digital advertising analytics and what we're actually making. So like all of those numbers that exist, they exist because they're leading indicators, right? Like we can create proxies within social media or within digital analytics that lead us to success. Because if we're just doing social and digital without bridging that gap, then all we're doing is just throwing darts at a wall. It takes somebody to actually look at that data and not just pull a Google Analytics report every month and say our traffic's up, but to actually say, okay, well, our traffic sources are these, and our social media activity was that, and that led to this increase or decrease in whatever it is that we're measuring. That's what we need to do in order to be effective. Otherwise, we're just well-meaning people doing good things, and there's nothing wrong with that, but we can be more effective.
All right, and Nick, how about you? What do you measure to determine your success on social media and why?
Well, I think Mark and Connor definitely nailed it. Conversion is everything. So it all depends on the goals. That's how you really measure success. On the analytical side, it really depends on the post and the type of content that we're producing. But the thing that we constantly measure here is that we always want to maintain a specific engagement rating or fan growth percentage month to month. So that's what we always stay on top of. We just want to ensure that we're growing at a healthy rate, and because we're competitive, we want to see how we're doing versus our competitors. But the name of the game is listening and optimizing. We definitely take a quality over quantity approach. It's how we do it, and it's more manageable for us to do it that way. And we find that it's also more meaningful.
Perfect. All right. So what do you guys think about sharing some 3 tips for nonprofits for social media? Nick, how about you? Let's get you started with sharing your 3 tips.
It was really difficult to nail down 3, but I want to focus more, since I work for a really large organization, I came from the entertainment background, so I have I had no healthcare experience prior to Children's Hospital Los Angeles. So these are the three things that I've learned working in the nonprofit space, is that you really have to manage expectations. Social media success is driven by your audience, so you have to be sure to communicate internally that you're likely to modify the plan as things go on. They should definitely know that ahead of time. Nobody likes unexpected surprises, especially when you're in the middle of an ad campaign. Number two would be win internally first. You know, we've got a large amount of volunteers and employees who tend to be our biggest fans. They're already volunteering or working for the organization, and you know they're passionate about the cause, or else they probably wouldn't be here. So who better to build a groundswell for you when you're creating a campaign? You know, you have to be practical, though, with it. You know, you don't want to force things, which leads me to number three. You definitely don't force passion. Not everyone's going to get social media the way that we do, or anyone listening to this podcast would, and not everybody cares. So you can't force them to, and that's, to me, the key ingredient in keeping things authentic, is not forcing that passion.
Exactly. Mark, how about you? What are your 3 tips on social for nonprofits?
Well, I'm really glad that Nick brought up employee engagement and creating evangelists. It's huge. Mm-hmm. Can't stress that enough. Really, we have to add value. And primary way, real easy, is it's not about you. It's about them. It's about the donor. It's about the people out there. So often we think about what we want instead of providing what they want. Personal benefit is a great example. Nonprofits, especially in social media, like to go, look at me, look at me, look at me, give us money, look at me, give us money. Volunteer, give us money, look at me, and they forget that people will get anesthetized to that really quick. Chris Brogan, and you can Google Chris Brogan Outpost Strategy, does a really great strategy that I think is real simple, where you consider your blog or your website home base or planet Earth, and then you consider LinkedIn and Twitter and Instagram and all the rest satellites, you know, outposts. And here's where the conversation is, where you make friends, and right where your web page and your blog is where you collect new names. If you're not collecting new names, you know, we're all dead in the water. So it's new names, volunteers, whatever. So here you make friends, and then in your newsletter or on your website is where you do the selling. Don't do so much selling out on social media. Use that for making friends. And I was going to say listen, but I'm going to change that to empower your employees and allow them to take risks. I know of some brands that have 40 emails just to vet a 140-character tweet. You know what I mean? Hire well, train them, allow them to make mistakes, support them. I mean, you're going to make mistakes, but you know, you closer you get to real time, the better. So if you have this vetting process that the person that's running your digital has to go all these steps on how to answer a retweet or how to tweet and all the content, get over it. Let that empower the person to be able to engage directly.
Exactly.
We need to add a slow clap to Mark's comments. You have to allow people to make mistakes. I think it's really important, especially in digital.
Mark, by the way, is it your birthday?
No, I have I have white wall paint walls, and it was my birthday about 2 weeks ago. And the thing about it is, it's a great idea, but it doesn't erase well. So.
Well, happy belated birthday.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, Connor, what are your 3 tips on social media for nonprofits?
Yeah, thanks. There's been a lot of really awesome tactical stuff that I feel like everyone's going to be able to take away. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and try to add value by taking a step back and think strategically. So before we get into like what are we retweeting, who are we replying to, and that, like why are we on social media and like what are we doing? I think and I'll go through developing a social media strategy in 3 tips. First is story. So what is our story? And like this, it can seem so obvious to us internally. Like we're trying to end hunger and homelessness, like get water to 1 million people, whatever it is. But what we forget lots of times is we have that opportunity to tell the story, and we get lost in the weeds and all of the little things. Like, what is that greater story that we're going to tell people? And the way I like to think of it is, imagine we had a room full of people in the movie The Matrix, and we had the opportunity to inject whatever understanding or whatever key story into their brains that we wanted to. What would that be? And the problem is, I feel like most of us would freeze in that moment, and we wouldn't know. We'd be like, well, that we're doing really good things, and then we're helping those people over there, and we need money, and we need to be able to, excuse me, distill that down to something really specific. What is that story that we want to tell? And then once we have that story that we want to tell, and I'll give you a couple of really good examples of organizations that do that, is Charity Water, for example. Charity Water knows exactly what their story is, and they do an amazing job of creating content to put that out. The Change Heroes does the same thing. They're outstanding in creating a story, putting that out. And what both of those organizations do really well is they engage influencers, and they're ambitious in the way they engage influencers. And what I mean by that is sometimes we personally can feel like, maybe that celebrity is a little bit too big, or maybe that digital influencer is a little bit too important, or they get emails like this all the time, and we need to forget about that. We're here for a greater cause. The reason we're involved in these nonprofits is because we really believe in these causes. And so we need to put away, maybe this isn't a big enough deal for that person, and relentlessly go after that person. In a loving, polite way, of course, but in a way that is going to get us to where we need to be. Because the best nonprofits, the best cause-based organizations that I've seen in the past 5 years have been the ones that just didn't care and said, hey, I'm on a mission to do something, come with me. And the impact of getting those people on board is incredible. And then finally, I would say, be consistent and be continuous in that content, because we might think, okay, we've shared pieces of content about this, or am I beating them over the head with this idea? Nobody is going to be passionate about that story or that cause unless the organization first is. So if the organization is kind of like beating around the bush and like sharing content that's like pretty or feels good or retweeting other people, that's great. But what we need to see as users and as the general social media community is that you're planting that flag and you're owning that cause, and you're saying, we're passionate about this, we believe in it, come join us. And by sharing content constantly, creating things, getting people on board, that all ladders back to that bigger story, that's when we have the opportunity to create that tribe and create that people who are following us along. I hope that that's helpful, and use that with all of the tactical stuff that the other guys have talked about, and that's a great start.
Perfect. All right, I actually have a question here from Twitter. So again, if you're watching us, make sure you are tweeting in any questions or putting your questions in our Google Plus event page. Tweet in your questions, but make sure you include the hashtag social60. I have a question here from Twitter. What are some tools you find useful to connect to international audiences? Mark, why don't you get us started with this question?
Okay, and this is not a paid plug, but Hootsuite. And why I say that is because Hootsuite to me is one of the easiest for scheduling, and one of the things I do a lot of work in the UK, and it really became conscious to me of the different time zones. I think it's the same tools, but just being aware that obviously, trousers and pants are, two different things. So there's a communication issue, but the time zones. When I got back to the States, I realized, I try to split up my content to include Canada, because I've done a lot of work in Canada, and now to include the UK and Australia. But I realized that I was missing the mark because I was not scheduling for other time zones. So really being aware of it and using Hootsuite to schedule.
Perfect. And Nick, what tools do you find useful connecting to an international audience? I know you work for Children's Hospital LA, but what kind of tools have you used?
Well, that's been a really interesting discussion that we've been having over the last couple months. We are Children's Hospital Los Angeles, but we do work globally. We definitely have partnerships in South America and we've worked with patients in the Middle East, and there's a lot of different areas of Children's Hospital Los Angeles that goes well beyond the borders of California or the United States. And so that's part of our storytelling process. And I would say, aside from a platform, and in this case it would be Hootsuite for us, but that's where, to me, digital marketing and social media, I mean, to me they're one and the same. It's just a channel of digital marketing for us. So aside from the platforms, what we do is really try to implement a strategy that crosses many different types of platforms. So native ads, paid ads, programmatic ads. I mean, we're targeting people, not necessarily locations, depending on the story, of course. But I would say Hootsuite definitely is a platform that helps us reach audiences in different time zones. But for us, it's a big, I guess the word for it would be just a big mix of things. I mean, there is a local strategy, there's a regional strategy, and then there's a global strategy, and no three are alike. So yeah, it's pretty complicated, but being called Children's Hospital Los Angeles has definitely been a hurdle that we're trying to overcome, and all that comes back to storytelling.
Mm-hmm. And Connor, how about you? What kind of tools do you use to reach an international audience?
Yeah, so real quick here, the tools are awesome, and I think that the question might have been about like software, it might have been about platforms.
Yeah.
And so I'll just say that when we're looking at international audiences, the first thing we look at is what are people actually using, right? Because we might assume that they're using Google Plus or Twitter or Snapchat or Instagram, whatever, but like what are they actually using? And a couple of examples are, we run a campaign up in Iqaluit, up in northern Canada, for anybody who, our American friends. Iqaluit is up in the north. And we found that they all use Facebook groups. Like everybody we were talking to, and when I say all, I don't mean that, use that term loosely. Using Facebook groups, we were able to get access to 85% of the general population. I don't mean our target population, I mean the general population, 85% would join this Facebook group. Whereas in Latin America, where we've run a few campaigns, they use Twitter as a person-to-person communication channel. It's not a broadcasting channel. It's something that you would use instead of text messaging or WeChat. And so we were able to get involved in some conversations there. But if I was to go to Southeast Asia, I'd be looking at Weibo. What can we be doing with Weibo, and like how can we be engaging with the community there? And so no strategy is going to be the same for any international market. So the first thing I do is understand how our users are engaging with social media.
Exactly. Okay, perfect. Another question here I got from the Twitters. How do you balance the qualitative versus quantitative measurements, and does storytelling factor into your measurements? So, Mark, why don't you get us started in here, because I remember you talking about measuring quality.
Yeah, so gosh, interesting there. I want to tag this last international real quick with something that nonprofits are not necessarily good at. So particularly, I mean, like Children's Hospital, he said, you have an international reach. Most of us just have a hyper-local reach, and studies show, like, our supporters are with 25, 50 miles of, where our home base is. But we have this idea that we need 1 million Facebook likes. Now, realistically, what are you going to do with 1 million Facebook likes? Come on. You know what I mean? They're all over the world. So my point is really, it's better to target and have a small audience of engaged supporters than to have 1 million people who just ain't going to do nothing and maybe just add to the noise. As far as quantitative and qualitative and all that good stuff. So I'm a little different, and I'm not saying that you should do this, but I believe that I'm really strong, you can't market to yourself. So one of the examples is Kenneth Cole, the clothing company, used one of my videos. And it was a video I didn't particularly care for. And I wish the blogger had contacted me and said, oh my gosh, we want to use one of your videos, which one? Because I would have picked a different one. But to that person, it meant something. So, and this is very important, especially in storytelling. So this also at the rescue mission where I work for. So, you know, we might get 1,000 views on one story, and we might get 30 views on one story. But that 30 reached the 30 people that that story meant for. So my particular strategy is I put everything up. Unless it has some really bad technical, or if some way after looking at it again, the person might, you know, there might be something they said that could cause some kind of drama someplace. Those are the only two reasons I would not put up content. Otherwise, it all goes up there. Nobody has ever said, oh, I'm sorry, it's out of focus. Oh, my sorry, somebody kicked your monopod. You know what I mean? But they have always commented. There's something, a big tip, especially in video storytelling, is authenticity has replaced production value. So there's still a place for well-produced videos. But some of the most powerful videos that I've done were from my phone or from a little flip cam I've had in my pocket that I didn't really plan on doing any storytelling. So really my, you know, I look at our numbers here at the rescue mission and what I do with invisible people. I look at it every day, mostly on Mondays. And, you know, sometimes the numbers are low, and it doesn't bother me. I don't say, oh gosh, we're moving backwards. It's the quality of those stories and that it's still reaching people. It's really important that you mix up the content, you have it in there that's targeted, you know what I mean, for the people, as we've been talking about, providing worth to the people, the donors, that is going to attract. Like attracts like. If you're going to put up a video, you want volunteers, you're going to put up a video of a volunteer. You're going to talk about volunteers, and so on.
All right. Connor, how about you answering this Twitter question? How do you balance the qualitative versus quantitative measurements, and does storytelling factor into your measurements?
Yeah, so I'm a big believer in vision and goal setting. I set vision and goals every 3 months for myself. I set a vision and goals every 3 months for my business, and we do the same thing for every piece of work that we do. So what we start out with is, what is our vision for a 3 month, 6 month, 1 year, and 5 year timeline for this project, and what does success look like to us? Because that's so much easier to align on than do we want 1 million views or 100,000 signups. It's like, what does success look like to us, and what gets us fired up? And then once we read that vision statement, we said, like, does this actually light us up? Like, if this happens, are we going to be losing our minds, high-fiving, going like, we made it, we did it? And if that's true, if we can all align on that, and that's something we can put on the wall and every day be inspired by, then we go, all right, well, what are the numbers behind that? What are the things that we need to do in order to achieve that vision that lights us up? And then we just work to those numbers. We just reverse engineer back from there. So it might be quality content. It might be just consistent content. It might be dirty, gritty stuff. Like whatever it is, like all of that stuff fills in once we reverse engineer back from the vision to some really quantifiable goals to the execution.
All right. And Nick, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, similar to these guys, you know, I agree. I mean, there's no sense in having 1 million followers if, you know, only 10% are engaging. And it just ends up hurting you in the long run. You know, in terms of deciding which content, you know, we're always focused on quality over quantity, as I mentioned earlier. And these types of questions are the very reasons why we set up those content buckets, and I'll repeat them again. You know, number 1, celebrate. Number 2, educate. And number 3, inspire. If they don't fit those buckets, we tend not to do them. I mean, of course, we'll make an exception if it's something that really needs to go out for whatever reasons, or it's a topical discussion. But yeah, I mean, focusing and constraining ourselves to these buckets really enables us to make smart decisions that really have a positive impact in our long-term strategy.
All right. Nick, I'm going to keep you up on here. I have a Twitter question that came in. Any tips on taking over social media for nonprofits that never had a full-time social media community manager before?
That never, I'm sorry, what was the last part?
Never had a full-time social media community manager before. I guess like maybe for freelancers or
right, yeah.
Yeah, like that.
I've actually been in this situation. So before being in nonprofit full-time, I volunteered for a lot of local nonprofits national and very local nonprofit organizations. So I have a lot of experience in this area. And the one thing I would definitely advise is don't try to do too much. Do what's manageable. If Facebook is where you're going to see the most ROI, then focus on Facebook. You can still use Twitter and Instagram and everything else for amplification if you need to. I mean, that's probably the easiest way to go about things, using the other platforms for amplification. But do what's manageable. Don't oversell things. I mean, it's going to be very difficult for you to manage on a part-time basis. You're going to end up just not doing it effectively. So yeah, do what you can, and just make sure that you make smart decisions on topics and content that you can manage as a part-time person.
All right. Mark, have you ever had experience in that, in like tips on taking over social media for nonprofit organizations that never had any social media or community manager full-time?
Yeah, well, they both said it directly, and for most part, Invisible People, I'm a one-man band. Again, you work backwards, reverse engineering. I've never heard it stated like that before. That's just one in my database. It's what your goals are, and then Nick also brought out being specific. For me, when I first started, because it was just me, where is my audience? And I'm seeing more traction on Instagram than I am on Twitter. Twitter 2 years ago was gorgeous. Now it seems everybody in my stream is trying to pitch something, whether it be a new book, a new seminar, or a new car. There's a lot of noise in Twitter anymore, and a lot of it's over in Instagram. And my thing is, whenever a new channel comes up, and there's probably 10 or 20 new apps every day that hit the market. So my tip is to get your username, and you can put it on the shelf. And then if it starts getting traction and your audience is there, start using it. I never wanted to be on Instagram. I never wanted to start uploading videos to Facebook. But once people are there and the audience is there and there's some engagement, then I made it happen. But I can't be everywhere. And that's very intentional. So I pick where I'm going to be. The other one that I can also, that's a huge tip, is empower the people that you're helping. So, and this is, again, I don't really mean to plug Hootsuite, but Hootsuite allows me to pass on access to my social media channels without giving on the credentials. So there was a homeless mom up in Seattle who ran my Facebook page and Twitter for 2 years. And I was like slam bandwidth-wise, and she needed something to do in purpose. And at the time, I was struggling for funds, but I was able to pay for her cell phone bill. And my point is, the more that you can engage people, I don't know what your particular nonprofit is, but if you can find people and allow them access and have them curate some of the content, it can be very powerful. So there's a lot of different avenues. The other one is to time box it. Say you're wearing a lot of different hats, and you can say, okay, Monday morning from 9 to 9:30, I'm going to do analytics, and then from 9:30 to 10, I'm going to do scheduling, and then you work it out. So because social media can really quickly eat your life away. But if you time box it and start scheduling it, it's great.
That's why you get a full-time job in it.
Connor, how about you answering that Twitter question about taking over possibly a social media for nonprofit?
Yeah, real quick, I'll just give an example. So we'll work with nonprofits sometimes and bring in volunteers to do the management. So we're working with the British Columbia Hospitality Foundation, which is this amazing group who supports people who work in hospitality when they're sick or injured or otherwise out of work. And so we're onboarding right now a volunteer community manager who's going to be doing the day-to-day. And his first task is actually going in and learning everything about everybody who's engaged with the nonprofit. And so, like, what do these people like? What do they care about? What have they engaged with in the past? And then getting to know them on a personal level. And then once that's done, then everything else is easy. And so what I would do if I was taking over a community management role with a nonprofit that hadn't had a full-time community manager is like reach out and let these people know that we care about them, that like the organization is fired up, that they've been helping support and spread the word, and then right away we're going to have this band of engaged people who are all working together towards the same thing.
All right, so I have another question here. What are some social media blunders that nonprofits should avoid? Connor, how about you take that question first?
I'll just go right out and say real-time marketing. I think real-time marketing is one of the worst things that's happened in social media marketing in the past 2 years. And I'll preface that by saying I absolutely 100% believe that brands should be on trend, on topic, should know what's going on. But so often we see these like nonprofits or charities or organizations trying to be topical and like cool, and then there will be a trending hashtag and they jump in, or they're talking about something that's completely irrelevant just so they can become a part of this trending conversation. And it really cheapens it for me. Like it makes me feel like the person running that or the organization doesn't feel strongly enough about their story to get the word out. Instead, they have to use these like sort of like cheap and tactics to try to get retweets. And so I'd say like stay on story when something's happening in the world that like makes sense. If we're talking about mental health for athletes, which I think is a very important topic right now, and the Super Bowl comes up, absolutely, 100%. But if we're talking about water for people in Africa, the Super Bowl is probably not a topic that we want to be jumping on board. So like, get in conversations that make sense and avoid the cheesy tactics.
Mm-hmm. Mark, how about you? What social media blunders nonprofits should avoid?
I'm going to do this one real quick because he just said it all, but really, you have to protect your story. It's very important that you protect your story all the way around. Protect your story.
Mm-hmm. And Nick, how about you?
100% agree with Connor on this one. It's got to be relevant. It's got to be relevant to your organization. Don't do it just because everyone else is doing it. Definitely don't jump on bandwagons. I mean, if I had $1 for every time someone wanted to reinvent the ice bucket challenge, I mean, I'd be rich. But I mean, keep it authentic. Keep it relevant to your brand, and you should do no wrong.
All right. Okay. Last question here. What has been your biggest social media epiphany? Nick, how about you?
Ooh, that's a tough question. I work in a really complicated place, and the epiphany for me was that I'm not the expert. I work with a bunch of experts. So I had to align myself with these experts who helped me sculpt content. And, a lot of that was bringing them into the fold. So when we would have social media meetings, when we have social media meetings, those meetings are getting larger and larger and larger simply because we're not the experts. The point people in those departments give us insights that make our storytelling stronger. We have a content team here that develops stories for various publications. So we often tap into them, but healthcare is a very complicated space, and without aligning myself with the right experts, I would fall short. And so that's been the biggest epiphany for me, is that I'm not the expert. Everyone else is. All
right. Mark, how about you? What's your biggest social media epiphany?
Oh, my gosh. There's been so many. I think I'm going to frame it more of an answer is everything is changing. You really have to. I referenced earlier how Twitter wasn't what it was, and now you have Instagram, and tomorrow it could be something else. You just have to really, really pay attention and really, really be flexible because things are changing, and they're changing at a faster rate.
All right, Connor, how about you? What's your biggest social media epiphany?
You know what? I can actually remember the moment when I had my biggest social media epiphany. It was about 2.5 years ago, and it was like I got hit in the face. I was working with an organization called the Kelty Foundation, which works with youth mental health here across BC and Canada. Amazing organization, great people, and we had been working really hard to create cool content. We're doing video content, photos from across the country, and then we just kept seeing this thing popping up in our own feeds, and it was just this little poorly is a strong word, but poorly designed piece of content. It was a speech bubble, and the speech bubble went up to the top left, and it said, "This person thinks it's okay to talk about mental health." And it was just getting shared over and over and over again. We're like, this has to be like a massive campaign. Who's doing this? Is this Bell? Is this like a big American organization? And I clicked through and I did a little bit of research, and I realized it was a tiny little nonprofit with 700 likes based out of London in England. And so I was like, what is going on here? And that was sort of when the light bulb went off for me. I was like, that post wasn't about the organization. It didn't make them look good. It made the person sharing it look good, because what ended up happening is when you click share, the little speech bubble comes from your profile photo, and it says, "Connor, this person thinks it's okay to talk about mental health." So that changed everything for me. Just that one post, just realizing that the social media is not about making us look good, it's about making them look good in order to tell our story. And I mean, I recognize that now in so many different places, one being Charity Water. I mean, if anybody who's not familiar with Charity Water, they're an amazing water-based organization, and what they do that's similar to that is, rather than saying donate, 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 or your money's going to go to a good place, they do all of those things, and they have incredible transparency in knowing where your money's going. But they say donate your birthday, and this is something that anyone can do, anyone from like 12 years old all the way up to 100. So what you do is you donate your birthday, and they empower you with a page and with content to share about this cause, why you care about it, and instead of buying you cheesy presents this year, you're asking people to donate to Charity Water. And in doing that, you're not making Charity Water look great. I mean, you are, by proxy. You're giving the user an opportunity to tell the story and make himself look great. And so, like, that for me is the brain shift between like traditional PR and marketing and really effective social media.
Definitely. Well, that wraps up this month's Social 60. Thank you so much to our three amazing panelists, Connor, Mark, and Nick here. We hope everyone enjoyed this month's panel, because I sure did. Lots of great snippets, social media tips, and a lot of examples from nonprofits here. So to learn more about how to implement all these strategies that our panelists have talked about on social media with Hootsuite, make sure to join our free webinar on social media and Hootsuite dashboard tips for nonprofits next Thursday, May 6th at 11 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. We're going to be sharing out a link for you to register. And I'll also be doing a blog recap of today's panel. So make sure to keep an eye on our blog.hootsuite.com on Tuesday, and you'll be able to watch this video again. Actually, you can watch it again right after this, because it'll be live on the Hootsuite YouTube channel, but I'll be doing a blog recap on Tuesday, and it'll be live on our blog then. Again, thank you so much to our amazing panelists here. We're excited for what you guys are doing with your nonprofits, and we hope to see our viewers at our next Social 60. So thank you guys so much. Bye.
Thanks, Christina. Thanks, guys.